Oh, hello. I'm here to speak to you on the World Intellectual Property Organization Development Agenda, which is a proposal that was put forward by a group of developing countries 3 years ago, mainly to discuss and rethink the whole system of intellectual property towards a development-oriented perspective. It was put forward by a group called the Group of Friends of Development, which is made by 15 countries and led by Brazil and Argentina. Some other countries that make part are Egypt, South Africa, Ecuador, and so on. And it's a proposal that at first was very difficult to move forward because of the main pressures from developed countries. In a way, they thought that a development dimension was already being discussed within this organization, which is the World Intellectual Property Organization, or WIPO, which is a specialized body of the United Nations focused on discussions on intellectual property, mainly trademarks, patents, biodiversity, software, and so on. So today is a very important day because we are just going through the WIPO General Assembly. And after 3 years, this proposal, this development agenda proposal, has been accepted finally. And 45 proposals have been put in the table to be discussed further. So it's a very important step forward. It's a very important day for intellectual property and for WIPO, but it's also not the end of the road. Actually, it's the beginning of the road. Now we have to continue discussions. Next year, we're going to have at least 2 meetings here in Geneva in order to discuss and know how to implement these 45 recommendations. So it's not enough to have some very interesting and good proposals on the paper. Now we have to bring this out of the paper and put into action. And that's why it's very important to have people working in the international level, but also in the national and regional levels. So I would say that we from FGV Brazil, based in Rio, we are trying to make partnerships with the government. So we have a partnership with the Ministry of Culture, with the largest Brazilian consumers group, and also with some other NGOs within Brazil and in Latin America, in order to help the Brazilian government to implement some issues within Brazil. So I would say that it's important to act on the international level, but it's also very important to bring it forward nationally. We cannot just wait for the international issues to be developed within this international fora, let's say WIPO. We need to, meanwhile, to take some actions within our countries. So, for example, we are doing these studies on flexibilities on copyrights to trying to identify which flexibilities foreseen by international treaties ran by WIPO or the WTO could be implemented in Brazil and have not been yet implemented. And then with that in hand, we could try to amend, for example, our copyright law, our patent law, in a way that we could make it more flexible and taking into account the private interests and the public interests as well. So it's a matter of striking a balance between private and public interest. A very important issue on the agenda is the discussion of a future access to knowledge and technology treaty, which is basically a way to think which kind of flexibilities could be implemented within all international treaties to incentivize open collaborative projects like the Human Genome Project or Creative Commons licenses or free and open source software. These are very important issues that are based on copyrights or patents or any kind of intellectual property, but they are not non-exclusive. So they do use intellectual property rights, but they somehow manage to incentivize collaboration and innovation and creativity, whereas sometimes the current traditional intellectual property system just prevents people which are not the owners from having access to it. So when we talk about developing countries and least developed countries, it's very important to bring into discussions the issues of access to information and knowledge in general. So this population cannot afford, for example, books, cannot afford to buying software, licensed software. So for them, for us, it's very important to use these collaborative, open collaborative projects like free software and open access licenses. For example, in the case of free software, the license is free. You don't charge to have the license, so it's a budgetary advantage. The code of programming is open, so anyone can change it in a way to improve it and to distribute it. So it's a very interesting way to really make technology transfer. Whereas when you have a proprietary software, you're not allowed to access the code, the programming code. So there's no real transfer of any type of technology. So that's why all these discussions at WIPO here are important. They are going to affect somehow in the future people's lives in general. So let's think every day, everything we use or touch or even eat is somehow protected by intellectual property. So the telephone you use might be protected by some patents. The software, the computer we use are protected. Music we listen to, books we read are protected by copyrights. Design of a bottle of a perfume, of a bottle of a beverage, or a chair could be protected by designs, industrial designs. The chemical formula of a medicine is often protected by patents. Even the pens in the wall could be protected by somehow some kind of formula. Even foods, genetic modified foods, agrochemicals, machines used in agriculture are protected by patents. So almost everything nowadays are somehow protected. So that's why these discussions here in Geneva are very important for developing countries, for developed countries as well, but mainly for developing countries to try to strike a balance. And not only the international discussions, as I said, are important, but nationally, even academics, research institutions, or NGOs that don't have enough funds to come to Geneva, they also have a very important role to play in their own countries. So it's very important to somehow try to intervene and influence their own governments, and by doing research, by doing advocacy, and trying to flexibilize the intellectual property system as a whole. Thank you.